Hello, Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas, and I listened a little bit to Marco Rubio's speech about the so-called ceasefire, and the first words that popped into my mind was this: Trump should have listened to Steve Bannon. Let's talk. Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas. Don't forget, Jamarl and we both run our shows together. So if you are watching on either one of the channels, if you're watching on my channel and you're not a subscriber to Jamarl's, make sure you subscribe to his and vice versa. We're going to be doing a lot of work together, a lot of stuff together. So let's start here, Jamarl. I'm watching Rubio, and here's what I hear from him. Russian aggression. I hear that word aggression and I'm like, oh man, Kaja Kallas is, man, she's dancing right now. Then I hear that what's interesting is this. He's going to the neocon narrative. He says, yes, we've got to make sure that there's future security guarantees because we don't want that to happen again. We don't want Ukraine to face this kind of aggression in 5 or 6 years, right? So now he's turning it around. In fact, the Trump administration had struggled with G7 in various meetings because they didn't want the words to say Russian aggression and how this started. And Marco Rubio reverts to, it's us trying to protect Ukraine from Russia with this so-called ceasefire, really 30 days. You know, the whole thing's a joke. And we put together this with our proxy / partner, Ukraine. And if Russia doesn't accept it, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm filling in the blanks. If Russia doesn't accept it, then we know who's the impediment to peace for 30 days. We know who's the impediment to peace. So it's easy. We agree with this. Ukraine agrees with this. The European warmongers, they're dancing in the street. So you're now aligning with Anna Baerbock and Kaja Kallas and Keir Starmer saying this policy that Starmer and crew loves, that we love, that the neocons who are laying on their back being pummeled and surrounded and cursed, they all love, the neo-Nazis, they all love it because they need a way out because they're getting their asses kicked. We're all good for that. And if Russia doesn't accept it, they're the bad guys. And I'm like, Trump, you should have listened to Bannon. Now, Rubio and the neocons, we always knew that they would, you bring John Bolton in your house, he's going to stab you in the back. You didn't learn, did you, Trump? You brought him right back in the form of Marco Rubio and Waltz and the rest of these guys, and you're getting the same thing. And you know what? You really deserve it. Jamarl.
I don't know if you've ever read the book Three Body. My audience knows I am suckered for that book and for that series.
No.
There's a guy, the part where the people are talking to the aliens. And in Dark Forest, they come up with this thing of all of these plans in regards to how do we stop and protect Earth in 400 years from this alien force that is so radically advanced beyond us. And all of these plans came up. And as the plans are being exposed, the people will ask, well, what do you think of the plan? And they would say, the law doesn't care. They don't care. Putin doesn't care.
Right.
And the reason I say that is you've passed all your sanctions. They don't respect Europe at all because from Russian point of view, these are untrustworthy actors. They don't matter. They've been trying to kill Russians for the last 3 years. They're irrelevant to the process. The United States has done any and everything in its power in order to win that war, putting all of these missiles, weapons, and everything else in Ukraine up until the point of having a nuclear exchange with Russia. What are you going to do beyond what Joe Biden has already done? It's that. Joe Biden has shot his load. It is shown that they have no capability of changing the context of the battlefield on the ground. And you are untrusted and disrespected. So why does Russia care that the forces that have been aligned against it for the last 3 years to kill Russians to the tune of like 100,000, if not more, why does Russia care that they've cobbled together a document and come up with rhetoric? How is this different than for the last 3 years? I guess that's my point. They don't care. It doesn't matter. Now, what does matter is that this is an opening salvo. What does matter is that Zelensky, who passed legislation to prevent peace talks negotiations, or anything of the such has been bent into form into accepting the term, we will accept the peace talks and ceasefire. That's different. That's new. And I'm not going to panic on this. I'm going to look at what Trump does. And from the standpoint of trying to get language changed from we are going to win, we are fighting for as long as it takes, we're doing all of this stuff, to now Zelensky, ass between legs, we'll take peace talks and a ceasefire. Now, you're right. They're getting routed in Kursk. In a few days, Kursk is going to be liberated. And there's going to be a massive psychological blow to the stupid idiots that went on CNN saying this is great. And from the other people in Zelensky's team that decided, yes, we are going to invade this area. So Russia has no reason at all for peace talks. Like Captain America said, we can do this all week. They can do this, destroying the Russian military for the next year. That's assuming the the Ukrainian military even lasts another year. And the fact that the Ukrainian military at some point is going to collapse because they cannot get the people, they can't get the manpower and all of those things. Regardless of the money that you give them, they can't get the manpower in order to keep this war up. Why should Russia stop? It's that. It's not Russia that is going to be in the situation of giving anything, let alone a ceasefire. And they've already said, Putin, Peskov, Lavrov, all of these people have said, no ceasefire. We've done Minsk 1 and 2. There won't be a Minsk 3. We are going to keep going either until the military collapses, we accomplish our objectives, or we get an actual deal that will have a sustainable peace in Europe. Until it gets to that, you get nothing. And fact of the matter is, they can keep going. It doesn't, meaning you've already done what you're going to do for the last 3 years. This notion that Trump says, okay, we're turning back on intelligence and support. So what? They've been getting intelligence support for the last 3 years. You've done everything that you could do. What you can do now is come to some reasonable terms that brings this to a close. I would take this as Donald Trump's opening salvo, not as the thrust of what exactly he's going to do. When Russia says no, they will go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. And I'm hoping that something else gets a little bit closer to, let's have peace talks to end this, regardless of what is taking place on the ground currently. I suspect you're going to have to get to that. Otherwise, this is pointless. But I'm not going to take the social media approach and flip out. So, oh my God, Trump allowed. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say, opening salvo, bending Zelensky into form to even get in his mind peace talks as being something that is open on the table. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
am I being too egalitarian? Am I being too, I'm just going to wait and see what happens.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you from the perspective of the peace talks. There's two perspectives to look at this. From the perspectives of the peace talks overall, I agree with you, right? I 100% agree with you. Now, there's another perspective, and that is the narrative and rhetoric of the Trump administration, right? This is Marco Rubio's rhetoric today, and it's really important. Words are important. Yes. Your rhetoric is important because it implies what's behind it. Marco Rubio's rhetoric today aligned with Blinken and Sullivan and Biden. Mm-hmm. It doesn't align with anything that Trump has been saying as of yet, right? In fact, the Trump team so far has been very careful with their rhetoric. Because when the G7 wanted to write this document about Russian aggression, they said, we want you to take Russian aggression out of it. Remember that? Just recently. Right. They're like, look. And they said, how this war started? It's complicated, right? They talked about the Maidan. People on the Mago, they're sharing videos about Maidan. They're coming near to the truth. And look. And recently, one of them said it's a proxy war. So they're like, look.
Rubio,
if we're going to get anywhere, we got to be honest about this. You know what I mean? That's what you were starting to move in that direction. It's a proxy war. Yeah, we overthrew the government. That probably wasn't a good idea. And now here we are. Let's not talk about Russian aggression. Trump, hey, if they did the same thing to me, I kind of understand. We're going to have to work this thing out. There's two sides to this. And that's the kind of a more practical position they were taking, right? Out come Rubio today. We got to protect Ukraine from Russia. We have to stop this in 6 years or 7 years because Russia might do it again. Well, wait a minute. If it's a proxy war, right? If as you said just days ago, if in fact we overthrew the government and that we were behind the Maidan, if in fact, as Donald Trump said, I can understand. I mean, we're coming up on their border. You ain't going to be happy. If that's true, then it makes no sense to say that Russia would attack them again, unless we're going to overthrow the government again and install some more puppets. And you see what I'm saying? To say everything, they built a foundation, a practical foundation. We're going to base our rhetoric and our discussion on what really happened, not on this damn, Biden-esque kind of bull crap, right? Yeah. All that you've been doing this every day since Trump comes in. Rubio comes out today and says, you know what? I think I'm going to go back to the Biden narrative. And when he does that, Kaja Kallas, Annalena Baerbock, if Kaja Kallas or Kallas or whatever her name is, and Annalena Baerbock are like, I think this is a great idea. It's obvious it's a great idea for them because this is nothing but a public relations move to make Russia look bad. I know, we all know Russia ain't taking this. Yep. Russia's told you numerous times they ain't taking that. Donald Trump has said, Ukraine, you got no cards in your hand. Donald Trump knows he knows this is a deal that Russia wouldn't like, and they have no leverage to push Russia whatsoever to do it. So this is nothing. Effectively, what is it? I mean, here's the thing. Let me add this. I would like to say this is the opening move in what will be a protracted discussion and negotiation. But even then, that's not what Rubio said. He said, if the Russians don't take it, they're the bad guys. Well, if Russia doesn't take it, then we know who's the impediment to peace. But you already know Russia's not going to take it because they told you they're not going to take it. So, Marco Rubio, you are calling Donald Trump a liar. You're calling Elon Musk a liar. You're calling them all. You're either saying they're lying, or you're saying they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So Marco Rubio has now done what I expected Marco Rubio at some point to do. He has done a 180 and said, you know what? Screw all this Trump, Musk, and Tulsi Gabbard bull crap. I'm going back with Starmer and Macron and Kallas, and that's the direct angle we're taking. Does Trump have enough balls to stand up and say, my guy just stuck a knife in my back, all the work I've done to build up a realistic rhetoric, and my boy just balled it up and threw it in the trash can and said, I'm here. He's doing what John Bolton did. John Bolton, what do you think about that? From that angle of the rhetoric, your rhetoric went one direction for all these weeks, gone. And now the neocons in Europe were shrieking in fury. Now what are they doing? Hey, so we're going to give Russia deals, but we know they won't take it. And then we can call them the bad guys afterwards. Yeah, let's make it happen.
It's a pressure campaign. I mean, it's effectively a pressure campaign. If you remember during the peace talks before, where they had these kind of sham peace talks with European leaders, and they come on and say, okay, we have a victory plan that we are going to back. And it's like, okay, dude, you guys had a peace talk by yourself. Nobody cares. It's like nobody, like, how do you have peace talks without the actual principal actor in the peace talks? And yet they did. And again, the entire point was all of us have gotten together and we decided that peace is a good idea. And Russia is the bad guy because it's not accepting the peace that all of us who've been fighting Russia have decided is peace talks. It's that, right? All of us who've been waging a war and have spent, $600 billion on this war, fighting and killing Russians, we have all together have now decided that we want peace. Okay, good luck with that. All of them had decided that they wanted peace once before, if you remember, because they had been fighting a war saying Russia should just stop fighting. Like, it's nonsense, right? Marco Rubio believes this. I mean, keep in mind, Rubio is not a true believer. Rubio's bent into form by Trump to go and do a job. Now, the question is whether or not Trump signed off on what Rubio said. That's the question. Because you could be right, or Rubio went rogue, and all of these European idiots got behind it saying, the ball is in your court, the ball is in your court. Effectively, all of them tweeting out the exact same message. Or Trump could be like, all right, go do this deal. And that language is perfectly fine. But against Trump, right? I've gotten to the point where I look at Trump and what he says as if it's being plotted on a graph, like A and B, X and Y axis. And as it's plotted over the graph, usually it's not going in a straight line. It's just all over the place. And it's like, okay, what's the through line to it? But I'm being very honest with you.
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, I very rarely pay attention to what Trump says because he says all sorts of shit all over the place. He would say one thing one day and then something opposite the next day. I started looking at, okay, what's the through line? What's that when you are drawing that graph? What's that midline between the things to which he's saying? And I figured, okay, what he wants is something around that. I'm assuming going into this that he is bending Zelensky and Ukraine in the form and in a position where they will be willing to go into peace talks. That's what I think. And considering that for the last 3 years, the language and the line has been unprovoked war of aggression, Putin is Satan with cancer and is going to die in 2 weeks. Like, it's just nonsense, right? And from the standpoint of the West, the United States, and from Europe, they have one tone, one language. And Trump comes in and says, okay, this is complicated. Okay, that's not the language that people have been using before. Russia wouldn't accept a ceasefire. Trump said it himself, as you pointed out. Why would they do that if it's going to restart again in a few weeks? Meaning he's taking a certain tact, meaning him, the principal actor that is going to make a choice one way or the other, and the principal actor that's probably going to end up talking to Putin at some point. Meaning whatever is decided is going to be decided in that. This pressure campaign almost is like the U.S. patting Ukraine on the head, says, okay, we had talks with Riyadh, we'll have talks with you too. It's okay. We'll do that. Meaning I'm not putting a huge amount of stock into what Rubio is saying, because I don't think Rubio is the principal actor. I think they are trying to bend Ukraine into form and shape that will be willing to accept the deal. And up to this point, their point of view has been no ceasefire, no deals. I mean, when he got in the fight with Trump, it was, we don't want a ceasefire. That was one of the things that they were effectively fighting over. Trump was like, if we get a ceasefire and we stop the bullets today, you should take it. Zelensky's like, I don't want a ceasefire. Well, this is a different tact now, in the sense that Trump has effectively forced Zelensky to accept either talks or at the very least a ceasefire, something that he wasn't willing to do before. So Zelensky's language, Rubio's language, yeah, I 1,000% agree with you. It is a tack back. It's not the language that Trump was using prior, but it could be a pressure campaign that they're trying to use, even though they have full knowledge and apparent awareness that Russia's not going to accept us. Now, I agree with you. I just don't know what it means, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. I don't know what it means in real terms. I agree with you.
You know, I'll put it like this. I also feel like this. When I look, like there's an article right up now on RT, right? And it says, you know, thousands and thousands of Ukrainian troops are encircled right now in Kursk. And I'm like, yeah, they'll take a ceasefire now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right? Like, it's
we got, you know, what's happening on the front line? We got 5,000 troops encircled. You know, I'm thinking about this ceasefire thing. You know, perhaps in hindsight, we were maybe a little hasty in turning down those ceasefires. How's it going on the front line? 10,000 troops. Let's do it. Let's make this happen. We'll do the ceasefire. We'll get those 10,000 troops home, get them all bandaged up, rearmed, things like that. And then about 30 days, that ought to take us that, and then we'll talk. What do you say? I've had a change of heart. You know, that's the way I see it. Your troops are encircled. Of course you want a ceasefire now. It's certainly, militarily speaking, it would be a brilliant move for the Ukrainians when they get thousands of troops encircled to accept it. So I don't think it was like as much as, again, and what do we keep talking about? I think the ceasefire acquiescence, shall we say, was generated by the facts on the battlefield, as ultimately this thing's going to be decided by the facts on the battlefield. You got thousands of people encircled. Of course you're going to take a ceasefire. In fact,
you don't think it was Trump. You don't think Trump bent him in the form. You think it was, okay, these guys got routed.
We're screwed. Do we have any way out? What do we got? Well, they've encircled 8,000 troops. Is there any way out? Nah, they're pretty much mincemeat. They're all going to get grabbed, taken in. We'll be humiliated. Our people all over Ukraine are going to say, what the hell's going on? We just had 8,000 troops encircled and like another 10,000 torn to shreds when they were trying to leave. What's happening? Let's do a ceasefire. We'll say, and part of the ceasefire, nobody's going to be shooting, right? Yeah. Those 8,000 troops will just walk out unscathed. Brilliant military move. I'd do it. If I was one of the troops that was encircled, I'd be calling, hey guys, can we get a ceasefire? How long ceasefire do you need? Yeah, it's going to take us a couple hours to walk back to the Ukrainian border. 2 hours will do. You know what I mean? No. And what are the Russians going to do? All right, we got them all in our sights. They're encircled. Ceasefire. Ah, shit. You sure? But we can take them all out. We can take them prisoner. They got white flags. Nah, ceasefire. Let them go. No, I don't. That's the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my interpretation of it.
Right.
And then of course Rubio and of all of these people who are also knowing. Just think of all the people like MI6 and the Brits and these other people who were behind this Kursk humiliation. They're like, oh my God, we're going to look so bad when like what happens if the Ukrainians get mad at us and say, hey, that was the Brits' idea, and some British general set this whole thing up, and we got creamed, right? If you're in England, you're like, oh, crap. You know, Rubio, can you do anything? Okay, we'll get a ceasefire, right? And now you're all the nice guys because you're going to get a ceasefire to allow your troops to escape a cauldron. The Russians ain't going to let them out of the cauldron, number one. No. But number two, it doesn't seem that there's a genuine motivation here for the betterment of things. And let me add this, 30 days? If I'm the Russians, I'd say, look, that ain't gonna get it done. A 30-day ceasefire doesn't help them, doesn't help us. Come back to us with a 1-year ceasefire. We want to talk about a year ceasefire. We want to talk about a 2-year ceasefire. It's just too short. That doesn't help them. It doesn't help. You know, I'm prolonging the thing, and I'm not buying into that. I mean, and let me add this. You already know the Russians aren't going to take it. Yeah, no. If they take it, it's great. You get out, you get your troops out of the cauldron. If they don't take it, and what have they said? No. And what's the difference between that meeting they had under Biden when they were all in Switzerland or Sweden or something? Remember that? And they said, we're having a peace meeting, but the Russians aren't going to be there. And all these countries says, well, we're not coming. You said you were going to have peace negotiations without them. What's the difference between this? They just had them in Saudi Arabia right now. Let's have peace negotiations. Then what are you going to do? Well, after we negotiate amongst ourselves, then we'll present it to the Russians and say to the Russians, well, if you don't like it, then you're the bad guy. There is no goodwill. There's no good faith here. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
I slightly disagree with that. Like, look, I will tell you this. It is very jarring to go from we're with you for as long as it takes to, yeah, this is kind of complicated on how this war started. Those are two radically different points of view in regards to Putin is trying to take over all of Ukraine and all of Europe. That's all he wants to do. He's just a madman. Meaning that was the point of view that the Biden administration and Europe pumped out constantly. There was no deviation from that point of view. You couldn't have a different point of view. So finally coming around to, yeah, this is kind of complicated. We wouldn't have even accepted that. It was always a red line. Those are radically different points of view. And I guess from my point of view, you have to unravel that. Like that's something that it's hard to stop on a dime in having a certain take in that. You had Ukraine saying, we will not negotiate. Full stop. In fact, to be so emphatic about it, to go to their Rada, pass a law saying, we won't negotiate. We will not negotiate. We hate the Russians that much. F the Russians. To now, Zelensky sitting in a room, and I agree with you, they're being routed. And they are effectively being fundamentally destroyed in Kursk. They are encircled, and all of those people are going to die, or those people are going to surrender. There is no two paths about it at this point. So you could be perfectly right that Zelensky's like, I need a ceasefire to get those people out. This is going to be humiliating. If indeed that Kursk pocket closes and they kill all of those people, which will happen. It won't be just a psychological blow. It will be a political blow to Zelensky, who did that stupid escapade. But I think there's something to be said about negotiations. And in negotiations, oftentimes you stake out the most starkest point of view. I want all of Russia. Okay, that's your point of view. Let's now talk. Figure out, is there a middle ground between you taking all of Russia and a war that you lost and giving up the territories, having a crippled military, which it already is at this point, and changing the government to get rid of those Nazis from the government. I'm saying that to go from passing a law where you don't negotiate to negotiating takes some work. Is
this negotiating? That's the question. If they all get together and they say, okay, we have a potential outcome. We're going to present it to the Russians. And if they don't take it, then they're the problem. That ain't negotiating, is it? You know what I mean? If I say to you, hey man, I'd like you to do this. But if you don't do it, you're a jerk. I'm not asking you. That's a demand, right? That's saying if you don't do it, there's a punishment, or you and I are enemies, or you're the bad guy, you're setting it up. So when somebody says that to me, I'm going to say, man, because I guess part of it becomes this too. This is the front side of it. When they present it to the Russians, how do the Russians play their hand? What do the Russians do? Do the Russians just say, nah? Do the Russians say, you know what? We offered you a Easter ceasefire before. We offered last year, you wouldn't take it. We offered you a Christmas ceasefire. You wouldn't, remember that? You wouldn't take the Christmas ceasefire. So you're saying we don't ceasefire. Here's what we're going to do. We offered it in the past. We'll offer it again. April 20th to whatever, we'll do an Easter ceasefire again. So you can't say that the Russians aren't offering a ceasefire, right? They offer, and the Russians can genuinely say, we offered one before and you didn't take it. We were always good for a ceasefire. We'll take a holiday, we're a Christian, whatever ceasefire. So they do have a thing to fire back where they can both deny it and not deny it and have a credible counter offer. You know what I mean?
Their counter offer is we want to end the war. That's the counter offer.
Oh yeah,
that's the only counter offer that is going to be ever ordered. and honestly, it should be that way. I mean, they are effectively destroying the Ukrainian military, which was one of their primary objectives in the first place. Meaning they are accomplishing their military objectives as they completely destroy and eliminate the Ukrainian military. So from their point of view, why would we stop? Meaning, what is it in us? What is it in it for us to stop? You can't do anything to stop us. What you need to do is come with a legitimate offer to close and end this campaign and end this war for good, where security guarantees from Europe will be ensured. Now, I guess from my point of view, how do you get Ukraine to that point? And can you get them to that point on a dime? I mean, can you get the momentum that has been taking place over the last 3 years, politically and militarily, and stop it on a dime? Or, and again, this is coming out of the US. How do you do that? And not just how do you do it politically, where people aren't screaming, Donald Trump is bending over Vladimir Putin, Putin is sticking it to Trump. How do you do that in a society that gets that hyperbolic about anything that's effectively taking place? The US tends to function in a way of demands. It just is what it is. You're not going to get the US beseeching Russia for anything, even when the US has no cards to play in the process. What you get is something that looks like Rubio. That's my thought. Now, I could be wrong in that. I could be totally talking on my ass. I do think that Ukraine is being bent to form for negotiations, and that I don't think you get that in a step and fetch it way. Like, I don't think you get that with a beseech. I think you get that in this typical language that the U.S. talks, even when the U.S. has lost the war. Like, I don't think you get a president being weak in this case, even if the president is weak in the situation like he is right now. I think this is an opening move. And I agree with you. I don't like the language, but what other language would you really get out of the United States in this case? I think the reality of it is this is theater, and that the real action is taking place in the conversation between Putin and Trump. That's what I think. I think everything else is theater.
Also, this is a bad strategy by the Rubio people for this reason. It's kind of like on the street, as they say, they're going to get their ticket punched, right? They're going to get their ticket punched. If you say to somebody, well, either do this or I'm going to kick your ass, and the person says, Let's
Well,
go.
to be fair, Rubio didn't say he was going to kick anybody's ass.
No,
He just said,
didn't. He
you'd
just
be the bad guy. That's what
right.
he said.
But the question becomes because it's like this. Well, either you do this or we're going to think you're the bad guys. And as you know, Russia's like, oh yeah, like we really give a shit if you think we're the bad guys.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So now it's like you're pretending that you have leverage when you don't. What is your leverage? What is effectively your threat? Well, if Russia doesn't take this, then we know who's what did they say? We know who's the impediment to peace. And Russia's like, well, let's see. All of the global South, China, India, everybody already knows who's the impediment to peace. So what you're telling me is these knuckle dragging apes in the Kaja Calluses and Starmers who hate us with a fury of racial hatred, they're going to suddenly start hating us more or something, and that somehow the neocons around the U.S. they're going to suddenly say that we did it. That's already the case. So in punching their ticket, I mean, you're going to say if you don't do it, then we know who the impediment to peace is, right? The bad guy. And Russia's answer should be like, yeah, we really don't care what you think.
They
okay. The answer, notwithstanding how you're going to feel afterwards, the negative emotional state that you'll have towards us afterwards, notwithstanding how horrible that's going to be, we'll finish kicking their ass on the battlefield. Come to us. When you remember that little document we gave you in December of 2021 that outlined what we wanted? Yeah. Come to us when you're ready to talk about that. If you ain't ready to talk about that, you ain't really ready to talk about it. And if the worst that's going to happen to us is now that you're going to feel that we're the impediment to peace, I think we can probably live with that. I think we can probably sleep at night knowing that Keir Starmer now finally feels that we're the impediment to peace. Oh. That's the leverage you got. Right. Your emotional state is going to turn negative against us. That's the leverage you got. Really, that's all you're playing with. That's your cards in your hand.
The weight of your emotional condemnation. It's like, okay, we can bear that. I think we can take that.
What are you going to do? Hold your breath until we give you what you want? That's it, isn't it? I'll fix you like a little kid. I'll hold my breath until you give me what I want. Okay.
I'll put it to you this way. This is the way I see it. When members of Congress get up there and give speeches and they're arguing, do you really believe that any of them get up there and gives a speech and the other one says, you know what, you're right. I didn't think about that before. You're totally right. This is theater. Like I really do think on some level, this is a massive level of theater. Everything that you just said is true. And Rubio knows that everything that you just said is true. Putin knows that everything that you just said is true. Lavrov knows that meaning everyone in this process knows that everything that you just said is absolutely and perfectly true. Modi knows this is true. Xi Jinping knows this is true. Meaning all of them knows. Everybody understands the situation for what it is. They know that the ceasefire thing was meant as this flowy-ish thing that was going to be immediately denied. All of them know that. Like, that's what I mean when I said this is theater on some level. They're not doing this to each other. Like, they don't do this and then give it to Russia with the expectation that Russia's going to be like, hey, we didn't really think of the 30-day ceasefire before, but we will consider. They didn't doing that. This is for public consumption in the U.S. for Donald Trump to gyrate and shake to make it look as if he's doing something on his stage in order to try to get a peace deal. And I will go further. I think he is trying to get a peace deal.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I just think Zelensky is an impediment to peace. And you need to somehow manage him and manage Ukraine to get them to the ability to sit down and sign a document. And that document will be imposed upon them, by the way, when Putin and Russia or Trump make a deal and figure out what the deal is and say, all right, here's your deal, sign. However, you still need to walk that horse to the water. The catch becomes where that horse is now. That horse is in the White House freaking out about Trump and Vance effectively trying to get him to sign a mineral deal. Meaning that was the guy who you need, who ostensibly is considered the leader of Ukraine, who you need to either go to Paris to leave or sign a document. And by the way, Russia's not even going to accept the signature. They have to have an election first in order to choose who the next leader is. If Zelensky wins it, fair enough. But they need him to sign. They need Ukraine to sign. They need somebody in Ukraine to sign for Donald Trump to fulfill his peace deal obligation. I agree with everything that you just said. I guess my thing is, all of them know everything that you just said is true. And they're functioning on the knowledge. It's like if we're playing a game of chess, and both of us know when I play bishop to b5, he's going to play a6. And yet you still play a6, even though you know that's what the guy's going to do. Everybody knows. I guess that's my point. That's the only point I'm making in this. That's why I'm not. I'm trying to not immediately jump to my cynical point of view and thinking all of this is a farce. Trump is lying. Like, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to think of this in a way that I would think about domestic politics, in a way that these people are acting. You might be right. I hope you're wrong, but you might be right.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is that, because here's the thing about it, once you draw a red line, right? If you don't do this, that'll be, if Russia doesn't take it, we know who's the impediment. That implies that Russia cares whether or not you think they're the impediment into peace. That implies, but they don't. So it doesn't really matter to them. Russia, and what did Russia say? They said, we can't reply until they give us this thing and we review the details, right? Just like an attorney. It'd be like saying, all right, we're going to give you the final settlement. And somebody says, you're going to take the settlement. And the person's attorney says, hold on. We must review the settlement word for word and determine what's in the settlement before we decide whether or not to take the settlement. Don't ask me if I'm going to take the settlement. It's a 20-page settlement, and I haven't looked at page 1 yet. You know what I mean? Are you going to take it? How about I read the settlement first, right? What would you do if your attorney said, we're going to take the settlement? You said, have you read it yet? No, but I think it's probably good. No, you're going to fire that. You're going to fire that attorney immediately and get somebody who's competent, right? So the Russians, if you think about it, they're still on their kind of track, their pragmatic, bureaucratic ways. Yeah. Where even when I know their inclination based on what they heard is to say, get out of here with that crap, but they're not going to effectively say that until they review it. And when they review it, that will give them the grounds upon which to reject it, which most likely they will. They'll look at it and they'll say, but here's the problem. They still have a rule that says, they can have a list of things. Number one, they still got a law that's passed that says that nobody, if Zelensky can't, or nobody else can negotiate with us until Putin's out. Number one. Number two, and they just look through there and give a list of reasons. You can find a list of reasons why you reject it. And instead of just saying, that's a pile of crap, you can drag things out by giving them a list of reasons, legal reasons based on what this document is, why you're unable to legally accept. Let's not forget Putin's a lawyer.
Oh, see, it sounds like you're worried that it's like on one, Putin must commit suicide immediately. Two,
right, exactly. No, I think it's more like they can look at it. If they want to reject it, they can just outright reject it, right?
Yeah.
And then you got the ammunition. Well, they're the bad guys, not that they care. Or they can look at it, carefully consider each clause, and then pick the clauses that there's a problem with and say, well, according to Ukrainian law, they can't do this. According to Ukrainian law, they can't do that. According to an international law, we can't do that, and reject it based on bureaucratic administrative principles rather than just give them a flat out, we can't do it. You know what I mean? That's certainly an option that I would consider if I were the Russians.
It sounds like you're worried about external perception. And I don't think the Russians are.
No, I agree. I don't think so. I'm just saying, how do they do it? One of their options is to just reject it and say, nah, we're not going to do it. Another of their options is to choose various ways to reject it. And one of them is to administratively pick it to pieces and still reject it. But we're based on this. I'll put it like this. If they can find things in it that are not legally sound, that they can reject it for reasons to reject it within the document itself, I think that's their best move. That's probably the smartest thing. That way, they don't even have to have the discussion about the good guys and bad guys. They can just say, well, you wrote it out. Look at this, this, and this.
But see, that's what I mean. Like the good guys and bad, like the U.S. is not going to care why they reject it. They're just going to care that they reject it.
Yeah.
And the propaganda that would come out wouldn't frame it in these legalese ways. Totally. In fact, it would downgrade the fact they use legalese ways to do it and just like, well, the Russians reject the ceasefire. I guess my thing is, as you pointed out earlier, all of these countries know what's happening. Like, they know that Russia is not going to accept this. They know that the U.S. is putting this out purely in order to refill Ukraine with weapons, or a sucker move, basically. Like, yeah, we may be interested in negotiations, but if we can sucker you, we'll do it. And we'll just put those weapons in, and we'll fill that place back up with weapons and guns and give time for the Ukraine and blah, 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 blah. So the fact that all of this country knows it, then who is this aimed at? And I guess my thought is this is more so aimed at the public.
Yeah.
And because it's more so aimed at the public, does Russia really care? Like, do they really feel the need, knowing that all of these other countries effectively know what's happening? They try to make themselves put this in a legal framework of, we're denying this, but purely for legal reasons. And legal reasons in that case being, it's illegal for us to do this. And so by definition, we can't do it because it's illegal for us to do it. The US is not going to care. They're not going to care. The entire point of this document is not for them to care. They put out a document that they know the Russians is going to deny. So, there's a gamesmanship being played with that fact that they put out a document that they know the Russians on its face is going to deny, even if they found a legal reason for it. They did it to try to make themselves look like they're doing something. I'm very skeptical of this document. That's all. I'm very skeptical of this process. I think, like, for me, we are watching a movie, a very crafted, strategic movie, where we want to make ourselves look good. We want to make ourselves look strong. We want to make ourselves look active in this process. And even in doing that and making ourselves look active, we are in a level of gamesmanship with the Russians in regards to what we can get versus what they want. As you pointed out, the problem is we have no cards. Like, we're taking this position, like, you're going to be the bad guys if you don't take this, and you're going to hurt our feelings. It's like, okay, like, we care, right? Like, oh, Keir Starmer feels some kind of way about us. Oh, how can we bear the weight of Keir Starmer feeling some kind of way about us? Who can bear that weight? Who can bear that burden? Nobody cares, right? Like, they have done this for 3 years. Like, they have literally been putting money into the hands of goons to go out there and kill Russians. Not to mention what they've been doing in Kursk, like, alone, right? In that context, do the Russians care? Like, you've been killing us for 3 years. You've been arming maniacs to kill us for 3 years. You have driven tanks with Nazi insignias into Russian territory in order to kill Russians. Do we care that Annalena Baerbock and her Nazi grandfather feel some kind of way about us? They don't care. Like, I think, honest to God, I think they are so beyond the point of caring what they do in the West or what we do, that it really does boil down to, either you get a deal or we just keep going. We're going to win it anyway. Your military is collapsing. You can play around all you want. We will be at the Polish border. That's where we are. That's what I think they are. And so it's like, this stuff is for public consumption. Yeah. I really do think it's for public consumption.
Well, the other part of it too, and this is important, and this is where I would argue strategically it wasn't probably a good move for the Trump team for this reason. Okay, yeah. So you imply some kind of, if you don't, then we know who's the impediment to peace. Okay, you kind of back yourself into a corner, right? Because what you're saying is, if you don't, then we're going to align with Ukraine as the victims and you as the aggressor. That is the rhetoric you're using right now, even though effectively your rhetoric right now is Ukraine now has totally changed. As of Marco Rubio yesterday, he has realigned. Yes, as Rubio has realigned, and he is the Secretary of State. He is an agent for Donald Trump. Legally, under international law, he represents Donald Trump. His rhetoric represents Donald Trump. If another country, if Rubio says, as of tomorrow, we're going to launch nukes against Russia, and Russia launched defensive nukes, they would have a right to, because they would say the man who speaks for the president, he's an agent for the president, said he's going to nuke us. Not like, oh, well, why would we listen to him? He's only the Secretary of State, right? So legally, he speaks for Donald Trump. His words are as an agent for Donald Trump. If you are the head CEO of a corporation and you send your vice president out or one of your members of your board out to go negotiate with somebody on behalf, you sent them out on your behalf to negotiate, and that person has a press conference, Under corporate law, they speak for you, right? So here's my point. Somebody can sue your whole corporation based on what they said. You can't. They could say something, and you could say, no, don't sue us. Only sue him. Sorry, he's speaking as an agent for your corporation. So he is speaking as an agent for Donald Trump under international law. So my point is, he has now completely taken a different direction as to what Trump says. And here's the problem. I think that was a bad move for Trump. Russians don't give a shit. You're right. You are right. Here's what's a bad move for Trump. Because now it becomes when the Russians say, and they will say, we ain't taking this deal. Well, they'll have a counter offer, maybe they won't, whatever. But they're going to say we ain't taking a deal. What do you do, Donald Trump? What do you do now? Now you have gone out of your way to say we will be ambiguous about who we're blaming. Oh, but we got to change the G7. We're not going to come out and admit that we did it, but we kind of, okay, it was a proxy war. So we've been moving in the direction of being honest about this thing. Now Rubio reverts back and does a 180 and says, we got to make sure that this aggression, basically, that Ukraine doesn't face this aggression. So Ukraine's the one facing an aggression. Okay, that's 180 from what Trump has always said, but that's now. Okay, so now the Russians say no. Well, what you going to do to make sure they don't face the aggression? You've made it clear that you're on Ukraine's side. You're aligned with them, which means you're aligned with the neocons in Europe. What you going to do now? Russia says, nah, we don't like this. What you going to do, Trump? Are you going to revert back to your other rhetoric now and do a 180 from him? So now that you say, well, that's complicated, Rubio, it's the Russians' fault, Trump, it's complicated. You start to look like fools. You know what I mean? I mean, when Trump inevitably does his 180, what's being obvious is this. It makes this, it looks like this, there's a reason it looks like this. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Yeah. One hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and your rhetoric does a 180 every other damn week. Rubio just made him look like a fool. He made Trump look like a fool. And however they recover when the Russians say no, they will look like even bigger fools. There's no way Trump gets out of this without looking like a fool. And he doesn't know what he's doing. Go ahead.
What happens when they say no? It's that part. Because you're so right. You're nailing it. What happens when they say no? I mean, because as you pointed out, Rubio has gone over there with this notion of, okay, now we have a 30-day ceasefire. That sounds great. They know that Russia's going to say no. So they would have had in advance, ideally, planned for the no. What is the plan for the no? I'm super curious. They have one. Right. Because they already know. Like Russia's not going to look at the document and says, okay, we'll look at this document, we'll take it into consideration, come back and say, hey, this is a great idea to allow Ukraine, who's getting routed, to get their troops. They're not going to do that. They already know it, right? How do you respond to the no? That's the question. That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, because to me, as you pointed out, Rubio is taking this kind of hard tone rhetoric. Okay, so what does Trump say? Oh, I feel bad that the Russians didn't do this. Or is it, I have a new sanction that I'm going to pass? Now, there was a report that Trump said he's not passing any new sanctions on the Russians. Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, you restarted support. Okay, but support was already going to Ukraine. So that's not really a thing that you could do in order to escalate.
An entire week without so-called support. You know what I mean? A whole week, Trump. After all of 3 years of providing everything you could, you allegedly, ostensibly stopped for 1 week. Yes. In a way, you kind of made yourself look stupid there, even there, a week.
Yeah, I don't know what he does if they say no. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, you've, again, I guess from my point of view, if this is indeed theater, then, this stuff is, then Trump is trying to move in a particular direction, even against basically all of his European allies, against Ukraine itself, and even against a certain section of the political space in the U.S. Liberals specifically don't want the war to stop. I don't know. I mean, one or two things is true. Trump is complicated in the way that he operates. I mean, even with North Korea, he was screaming bloody murder in North Korea, but then goes over and shakes their hand. So I'm not sure. I don't even know. I mean, he was doing the same thing with Iran, right? We are backing, we hate Iran, shaking our fists at Iran, but then turning around and say, hey, I want to have a conversation with Iran, and I want to talk to the Russians about Iran. The problem, I think, is that you're hitting on is this doesn't really work with the Russians. Like, you're not talking to Canada. You're not talking to Mexico. Like you're talking to another country with nuclear missiles that at one point you were literally at a point about ending the world with. And so it's like your threats don't matter to them. It's that part. Like, yes, we want to make a deal. And yes, we can have a conversation about these larger items beyond Ukraine if you're trying to get something about Ukraine, because you're not going to get it specifically about the war. But this bravado that the US typically has, where we're the hegemon, we're the exceptional nation. So when we're engaging anybody else, any of you, we're speaking from a position of authority as opposed to we're speaking as equals. Like, I'm not speaking to you as if I'm your dad or as if I'm the king. I'm speaking to you as equals. It's me talking to you as an individual or as a country, not as a vassal in the way that we would talk to Canada or Macron or Starmer. It's different. And maybe that's the issue. Like, I think from both of our point of views, we want this to be done in a sense of, okay, we're dealing with the equal and we're coming to terms. We accept we lost the war. That's not the way the US functions, though. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Like, can you see an engagement with Russia on the issue of Ukraine in a way that's not kind of like this? Like, how would you view it coming from a US context?
Oh, I think you're right. I think this myth of American exceptionalism is what creates the dynamic where the US cannot act in good faith. They don't believe that they have to negotiate in good faith, because exceptionalism, the term itself is, well, there are rules for everybody except us. There's everybody has to go by the international law except us. We're different. And so we don't have to do what everybody does. And when we make deals, if we don't want to keep them, we don't really have to keep them, because there's nothing anybody can do about it, right? I think right now there's a couple issues here. Number one, what is Russia's biggest ally? Time. Because they're winning and time is on their side, right? So Russia's perspective is, we can negotiate with you until we can. In fact, if I'm in Russia, I just think, well, we'd like to continue negotiating, because every day that they negotiate, is a benefit to them. It's like you're watching a basketball game and somebody's up by, 5 points with 30 seconds. They want to like dribble the ball around, kill time, anything they can do, because the clock is what wins them. They don't have to score. They got the game in hand, right? And the other team has to try to force them to do something, to do anything, to make an error. If you're winning, if you make a move, it could be an error. You don't have to make a move. You just got to maintain course and speed. So I think from Russia's perspective is, well, time's on our side. We don't have to take this. We don't have to do anything else. And if you guys feel bad, well, that's life. You'll get over it sooner or later if you're feeling upset about that. If you want to change the rhetoric, if you want to go back to the same rhetoric, that's good too, because that takes more time. Rhetoric switching is something that, kills a little more time on the clock. The closer we get to double zeros, the better for us. And so I do think that there's, which brings it to this. I think Russia's strategy here is kill the clock, right? Is to keep dragging this out and kill the clock and the Ukrainian soldiers, which unfortunately at the same time. And Trump has already admitted we don't really have any cards to play. So it's almost like they're trying to pretend that they got cards to play, when they don't have cards. And does the Trump team at some point, does Donald Trump get to the point where he just says, I know, because walking away, Trump, everybody's like, is Trump going to walk away? In a way, if Trump walks away, let me ask you this. Here's what I want you to interpret. I'm going to interpret this. Everybody is saying Trump's just going to walk. He's going to walk away. He's going to walk away. If he walks away, to me, at some point, it's saying, I don't have any cards to play. You don't have any cards to play. I'm willing to throw in the towel and just say, hey, guys, Russia, you won. Ukraine, you lost. Suck it up and take it. Ukraine's not willing to do that. I can't help them. There's nothing else more I can do for them, because they won't be realistic. That's how I interpret Trump walking away. Right. But I think that at home, he's scared to death on a way of walking away, because he knows the neocons and the blob is going to beat the hell out of him. So he's in a difficult position. Your thoughts about that?
That's my point. It's that part. Like, that's why I keep making this argument. And I don't know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that's why I keep making the argument that on some level, it's stage management. How do we get these maniacs into a position where they would accept the deal? and to do so without looking bad in the process. I think that's where it is. Like, that's why I keep saying, like, I can't frame in my mind what it would look like for an American president to speak weakly, like meaning to accept, okay, we lost this. This sucks, we lost. And we need to extricate ourselves from this thing. How do I extricate myself from this thing without looking like we lost? Right? Like, you don't want to accept a loss. And I know Donald Trump is going to blame Joe Biden, so fair enough. On some level, he's like, that's Biden's fault. I'm ending Biden's problem. Like, so, but even in that context, he still needs to be able to leave it and say, I got something out of it. Even if it's, well, Putin was going to take over all of Ukraine, and I stopped Putin from taking all of Ukraine. Mind you, Putin didn't want to take all of Ukraine. Exactly. He didn't want to go into Ukraine, right? So in that case, he can hold up something that really doesn't exist, but it's still based on the propaganda that was effectively fed to the American public and to the European public. Meaning, I got this thing for us. Joe Biden wouldn't have been able to do this. I got this thing without starting a third world war. I was able to prevent Putin from taking over all of Ukraine. He only took half. Right? It'll be that. I don't know if it's going to be that. I agree with you that at some point, if Trump gets sick of Zelensky, MAGA wants him to walk away. I think Steve Bannon is right. Walk the F away hard. Leave it. Steve Bannon said, I don't even care if you have an investigation. Like, that's how hardcore Steve Bannon was on that. I don't even care if you have an investigation. I mean, I don't even care if you figure out who stole the money. Just leave. Just call it quits. Walk away. I don't think he can do that. I agree with you. I think it's hard to do that because Donald Trump's argument during the election was, I'm going to end the war, not walk away. I'm going to end it, which means he's stuck with this idea of, I need to find some kind of just peace in this. I need to come up with a deal. That's what I need to get. I'm Donald Trump. I'm the man who makes deals. I got to make a deal. And I think his nuclear option is, I'll leave it, which he knows Zelensky doesn't want. Zelensky's over here begging the United States for money because he knows he can't get it out of Europe. And he knows within a month or two, they collapse without US support. So Trump throws that nuclear card at him. Maybe I'll walk. Maybe I'll call it a day. Maybe I'll just leave it. Maybe I'll say, F it, and just walk away. And Zelensky at that point, his nuts shrivel into his body when he hears that, right? But do they shrivel up enough into the body where he'll say, okay, I'll pick a deal? It's that part. Now, again, all of this stuff is on some level strategic theater and sublime negotiation. I'll say it that way. You know, maybe I'm thinking about these grand ideas too much. Maybe these guys aren't that complicated.
Well, you're right. I agree with you, but I'm going to distill it down. I'm going to distill this whole conversation down to one thing, because you're right. Everything you said, everything we've said, I think so far was valid.
I think both of us are right on this.
This is a valid discussion, and we don't know until the Russians say no, however they're going to say no, and then Trump has to respond. But even then the Russians respond to that, and this conversation goes on. But there is one thing. There's a foundation here, and that's this. This is the foundation of things. The U.S. and NATO planned for years to take over the Ukraine. The Ukraine was a project. Take over Ukraine, arm Ukraine up, use Ukraine as a weapon to destabilize Russia, and then use a combination, full spectrum. We're going to use Ukraine militarily. We're going to use the public relations war. We're going to use diplomacy and bullying, and we're going to use economic sanctions to crush Russia, drive Putin out of office, and then we'll take all the resources of Russia. That's really the bottom line. Let's distill this all down to one thing: a massive loss. They did all of this. Russia kicked their ass. Every one of them, not the U.S., France, Denmark, Belgium, every last one of them. Putin, I mean, imagine like in the more macho parts of the world, the more male-oriented, old school parts of the world. You know what I mean? If Trump would go to meet with the Africans or the South Americans, or maybe Putin, and meet with the Muslim nations, and they were all around, and old macho kind of guys, they'd be like, nobody's looking. High five! Sons of bitches came to me, every one of them. I said, you bring your friggin' baguette-eating bastards, you schnitzel and potato-filled German sons of bitches. Every one of them came to my doorstep, and I kicked their ass and sent them home. And they all be like, you the man. They all take a shot, they'll high five, then they'll straighten their ties. It was very nice speaking to you. We had a great meeting. But when the doors closed, the guys, the old school guys, are going to look at each other and say, "Man, you kicked every one of their asses and sent them home." And they got to go home and walk around with a ass kicking on their back for the rest of their lives. A big A and a K on their back, and basically a footprint of Vladimir Putin's ass is on Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Starmer, Liz Truss, Macron. Every one of them that was in office got to walk around with a footprint from Vladimir Putin on their ass until the day they died. There's no way around that. There's no way around that. That's the reality of this matter. No matter what they do, they're trying to figure a way to spend the rest of their lives without a tattooed footprint of Vladimir Putin's foot on their ass, and ain't no way to do it, brother. There's no way they can get over that. That's the reality, I think.
Yeah. And NATO, what, 60-year organization? And the entire purpose was to take on the USSR, the Soviet Union.
And they finally got what they wanted.
They got what they wanted. And wasn't even the Soviet Union. Like it was like what the Soviet Union was like 20 different nations or whatever. It wasn't even that. It was just Russia by itself.
And it took on all of them. You've been waiting all this time for a fight with the Russians, and you fucking around.
How wasted
found out
that money was into that organization for all of those years, hiring and employing all of those people, all of these brains, with one thing: we need to beat the shit out of Russia. That's our job. That's what. Scott Ritter, when he points out, he says, I got up every morning with one thought: how do we beat the Russians? That was my job. That was NATO. So you had one job, beat the Soviet Union. You get a smaller country and you surround that country further with your people and, getting support from all of those different nations. And you get to the point where you effectively militarily surround that country. You dump all of the money, weapons into another country as a proxy to go take the country down. And they lose. And they don't just lose, they lose badly. Not just badly. All of that NATO equipment is burning in Ukraine right now. Or in Kursk, because apparently they lost more equipment in Kursk than they did in the offensive, which is mind-boggling when you really think about how much they wasted in the middle of nowhere. Like, think about that. There was nothing in Kursk. There was a power station or something, but that was pretty much it. And they spent their best men, the best material, a British-led plan, by the way, best men and best material, in the middle of nowhere, where they got bogged down and just destroyed. Like, this is the NATO planning that went into this mission. They finally got their chance. Like, think about it. They have been chomping at the bit to get at Russia for decades. Chomping at the bit. The problem is, Russia has nukes. And if you indeed attack them, you all will die. All of us will die. So how do we get at Russia without really having our fingerprints on it so much that they will respond with nukes to end the world? Ukraine. We can say that Ukraine is purely motivated by itself, that Ukraine didn't attack Russia, even though they were killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians after a coup that we engineered. But we can attack them in a way where we can say our fingerprints aren't on it, and Russia did it. Now, despite the fact that, like you said, all of these other world leaders knows NATO is going to the border of Russia. NATO overthrew a country. This is the problem, right? Everybody else knows it. The public in the dark. Western publics, anyway, in the dark. And so you can use this propaganda war in Western publics and get the West very cheered up over the issue of Ukraine without them really knowing anything about Ukraine. I heard NPR talk about this. And NPR says something like, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia has blown off all of the deals, and Russia has been an untrustworthy actor. And they said it, all of that in like one block, and then went off. that That was the way they explained all of this, of what we were talking about in that block. And if you think about that, that means every liberal that listens to NPR just hears that over and over and over again. Not to mention you have this kind of Cold War fervor in the United States, where a lot of the stuff that people, meaning reality doesn't apply in many Western nations on this issue. I guess I'm talking too much. You're absolutely right. Russia beat the shit out of all of those countries. And all of that money that went into NATO for 50, 60 years has been blown up on the White House line. Just ridiculous. In fact, the only reason they have peace talks now is because they lost. Otherwise, they'd still be chomping away. No, Trump just had to acknowledge reality.
Well, you know what it is, if you think about it. Trump is the only, Trump, in a way, he's like acknowledging the loss in a way without acknowledging it. He's saying we got to get out of it. You know what I mean? Yes. He's saying Ukraine has no cards to play. Ukraine has no cards to play. You know what I mean? That's like, I had some friends got divorced, and this lady was staying at my house, and she had 2 little kids for for 6 months or so. They didn't have a place to stay, let them stay here for a while. And she had 2 little kids. One of them was like 4 or 5 and could talk, and the other one wasn't old enough to talk. Right. Mm-hmm. So she grabs the older one, grabs the little one, walks in, and I'm not even going to say her name, but she says, let's just say her name was Jane. Right. She grabs the little one. The little one couldn't even talk. They're both looking, and she walks and she looks at me, goes, Jane wants a cookie. And I look at Jane, and I'm like, Jane wants a cookie. Jane wants a cookie. So I give Jane a cookie. Right. And she says, can I have one too? And I said, here's 2 cookies for both of you. And off they go, right? Jane wants a cookie, right? So Ukraine has no cards to play. Dude, Ukraine ain't even talking to Russia. Ukraine's not playing the card game. You are. You're really saying, I need to get the hell out of this. This is screwing me up. I'm looking like an idiot. We've lost the fight. And I have no cards to play. But I'm just going to say Ukraine. Wink, wink. Ukraine has no cards to play, but I want out. Well, why do you? Here's the thing. Why would you care whether Ukraine has any cards to play? You ain't Ukraine, right? What difference does it make? Ukraine has no cards to play. Putin could call them. Yeah, I sure agree. Ukraine's kind of screwed, aren't they? Yeah, they are screwed. All right, have a nice day. Bye. Why do you give a shit about cards Ukraine have to play? Why are you even talking to me on behalf of Ukraine? Well, just go on about your business, Trump. Ukraine has nothing. They're always on the other side of the world. What do we care about Ukraine? Because Ukraine is the U.S. and you got your ass kicked using Ukraine as a weapon. And now you got no way out other than to say, damn, I got my ass kicked. I didn't like that. I've lost the war. And you don't know how to do that. You know what? That's all we're talking about. Yeah. Trump is trying to figure a way out. In a way, I feel sorry for him. Because really, he didn't do it. And he made some mistakes, but Trump wouldn't really want a war with Russia. He kind of likes Putin, to tell you the truth. He respects Putin, to be quite frank with you. But he's did some stupid things to go along with this during Russiagate. And now he's just like, I'm just, dude, he's sitting around here and they're like, you should do this, you should do that. And Trump's like, dude, I'm just trying to find a way out. Get off my back here, man. Just trying to get out. Somebody help me. I'm just trying to get out of this thing. And I don't know how the hell I'm getting out of this one. Please, Putin, please. Witkoff was over there today. What was Witkoff talking to Putin about?
I actually like Witkoff. I like Witkoff. I don't know why. It's something about him that I like. He's like a bulldog.
You can trust guys like that. He went over and told Netanyahu, you got to do this or else, right? That's the person you can trust. He's straightforward. He's no BS. Yeah. What is it? He's straight, no chaser, or what? How do they put it? Straight thinker, no chaser. That's him. You can negotiate, but that's all we're going to be talking about in the future is how does will Trump be able to interpret a flat-out loss of ass kicking of the highest order? Will he somehow be able to turn that into a graceful exit? I don't think you can do that. And we're out of weapons, really. They won't say it. We're out of weapons. They're our so-called allies. They're all out of weapons. Everybody's out of weapons. And we still got crap going on in the Middle East that we're in deep trouble in. So how do you turn an ass kicking into a graceful exit? I think that's why we're running our mouth off for an hour and we've accomplished nothing.
Man. Oh, that's the question. How do you extricate yourself from this situation and not look bad doing it?
Right? You started it. You started it. It got an ass kicking. And now how
Yeah.
do you do a graceful exit after you started it?
I think the nuclear option for Trump is the wall, but I don't think he can do that. Like I
Internally.
Really, yeah, I don't think I agree with you. I think politically it is hard to just say, screw it, I'm just leaving it. You're figure it out. I don't think you can do it. I mean, I don't think you can run an election saying, I'm going to end the war. That's not really ending the war, if that makes sense. Like, even if Trump says, screw it, they're still fighting. It may be for another month.
You know what it seems to me? This was supposed to be Putin's Afghanistan. They're going to get bogged down. They're mired down in here. We got two conflicts. They're like, we're going to do this so we can pivot to China. Oh, yeah, out of the frying pan into the fire, buddy. If you can't, like beat Hezbollah and Hamas, it probably, and if you're losing naval battles to Yemen, probably not a good idea to screw around with China, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the U.S. is mired in this muck in Ukraine. And of course, we could do a whole nother show on which I'm called, but they're mired in these. Whatever thoughts they have that they're going to somehow turn to China, you can forget it. To Asia, no chance of it, because they are mired. And I think what we've kind of determined in our conversation, no matter how much we talk about it, Trump don't have a way out, does he?
You got to get rid of Zelensky.
But then could you get something worse?
You got to make sure you don't get something worse.
And one other question: what happens when and if, let's say you get rid of Zelensky or you don't get rid of Zelensky, but Kiev starts to come unraveled politically? You know what I mean? Let's say somebody there kills him, and now this whole leadership of this country, and now these Nazi lunatics start saying we will or won't do this, and that thing. See, the danger is what happens if you get rid of Zelensky, but then that whole leadership starts to unravel politically. Who the hell do you even have that you can pretend is the leader of that country? That you can say we're going to Russia then says, well, how can I negotiate with them? They don't, their country, their political leadership is coming unraveled. And then you still can't get out because you created this mess. Then if it comes unraveled, especially the United States can't walk away. There's refugees flooding across the border into Poland, Hungary, wherever. You get rid of Zelensky.
That would be the worst. That's the worst case scenario. Honest to God. Because at that point, they're still at war. Russia's still killing its way westward. And then Kiev unravels. Yeah, that's the worst case. But let's just say it's not the worst case.
Right, of course. But it's bad.
Right? Yeah, that's unimaginable. It's like in regards to how much chaos that is. Trump needs a man in Ukraine. And look, in the same way that Rubio is out there effectively talking about ending the war, even though he doesn't believe in ending the war, obviously, he needs somebody where he can bend his shape in Ukraine. Now, to your point, are the neo-Nazis going to accept a government that decides, hey, yeah, let's have peace because the U.S. wants peace? That's the question. And look, I'm telling you, I've interviewed people who pointed out, he said, those people are maniacs and they kill people who dissent from a certain.
They're like HTS. You'll see something like HTS. Yeah. I got a buddy of mine who's Ukrainian, and his mother's in Ukrainian. He said, my mother doesn't talk to me because she's a Nazi banderite, and I don't agree with it, right? My own family, family members. And he said, Garland, when this war ends, there will be a civil war. He said, there will be people who are mad at the banderites saying, you sons of bitches. You tore our country to pieces. We're going to kill you. And they'll go into the houses of the people with pictures of Stefan Bandera and kill them. Then you'll have banderites. Oh, you sided with the Russians. You're going to get it now. And then they're going, you know what I mean? You could have like what's going on in Syria. And again, what does Trump do then? Does he just walk away and say, oh, well, everybody deal with that? And there's refugees flooding across the border into Hungary and Poland and wherever else the hell. You know what I mean? I think Trump is mired in this for maybe his whole presidency. I think the U.S. has been mired and mucked into this disaster. And I just don't see a way out. Maybe I'm starting to get to that point.
If the government doesn't fall apart and Trump gets a president's man, this will go much easier. He needs a president's man. Like, I don't know a way out short of that. Like, you need a government, and you need a government to sign a document that end it. That's what you need. Like, meaning the very basics of a peace deal is a document is signed between Russia Ukraine, maybe some other powers or whatever, where there's a joint security agreement where everybody is involved in security of Ukraine, whatever that looks like, right? But you need a Ukrainian government to be able to sign it, even if it's
Then
just
at least the UN can do something. The UN can say, okay, well, there'll be Chinese troops, South African troops. You know what I mean? The
Right.
UN can do a peacekeeper mission. You can have some kind of an international mission that maybe can start to come together. But like you said, but you got to have a document in order to do that. It has to go through the UNSC and all that.
And you need a Ukrainian leader to sign it. However it is, you need a Ukrainian leader to sign it. And you need the right to ratify, which means you need a government. So if it unravels, all hell breaks loose. If it unravels, all hell breaks loose. Trump needs to get rid of Zelensky. Full stop. There need to be elections. And Zelensky needs to go. Russia is not going to sign a deal with Zelensky. They've already said he's not the legitimate leader of Ukraine. That's their point of view. And whether you agree with it or not, that's their point of view. If that's their point of view and they win the war, then okay, sad day in that case, right? They got to get rid of him. I don't know. I mean, tell me, do you think of another way short of Zelensky walking or Zelensky being pushed out or Zelensky,
or just let nature take its course, drag this out a little bit longer. And, by the end of summer, let this thing fall apart and then let them, I put it like this, maybe you pretend to slowly negotiate until such time as Ukraine is in such a dire and desperate position that they have no other way out. You know what I mean? You might have to let this run until midsummer, fall into summer.
I so disagree, because that growth form will keep going. Yeah, that lunatic would keep going. That's the issue, right? Like, because what that assumes that they would stop at the point where the military is about to collapse. And I don't know that to be true.
Yeah. And what happens if the military does collapse?
Yeah.
If the regime does collapse, do we now have that position where you have kind of an anarchic state and millions and a broken state in Europe, and millions of refugees are flooding across the border into Poland, and there's nobody to make sure the electricity's on or the water runs, or you know what I mean? That you get into this point where millions of refugees are flooding into Europe. And guess what? And they're not happy. And they are very heavily armed. And you sent all those weapons there. And you got Vanderites coming across the border who are friggin' pissed and very heavily armed, bringing crime and drugs, desperation, prostitution. You have turned Europe into a conflict zone, and Europe starts to look like Syria. I mean, that's the potential, isn't it? Do you think that is a real potential?
Yeah. I mean, working at the network, I remember when this first started, and I didn't get, I think, the full significance of what was happening initially. And then I think one day it dawned on me, this is a modern war. Like, these guys have tanks, airplanes, missiles. They use all this stuff. Like nothing they were using in World War II. They're building trenches. They're building all that stuff. And when that dawned on me, and I guess I kind of got in that headspace, I was mind blown. Oh my God, people are shooting each other in the face. Like people are literally 20-year-old men are in a trench under bombardment. And you think to yourself, all of this because we overthrew a government in 2014. Like we kept fucking around with this country that led to this outcome. That's a really hard thing because it was conceivable that it was going to happen. For example, for an American context, let's say Donald Trump in 2016 just says, I win. And they say, well, no, you actually didn't win. You lost. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not leaving. And finds a way to stay in power when everybody in the country knows he lost. And California says, I'm done. We're not doing this. That guy didn't win it. This is not America anymore because Donald Trump won. New Mexico joins him. Maybe 2 other states join him. And Trump says, well, that's unacceptable. You can't leave. And he starts bombarding California and New Mexico because they are saying they're leaving the Union because Donald Trump has effectively overthrown the legitimate government of the United States. Okay, is California and New Mexico wrong for saying we don't want a Nazi in office and that hate us, and this is unacceptable to us. We're pulling away. You have broken trust in regards to the social contract that we have to be with you under the guise of you winning the election. You didn't win. Like, they're not wrong for that. And so when those countries or those areas start to pull away, and then all of a sudden you get Ukraine bombarding and killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians, okay, is it wrong for Putin to say this is wrong? We can't accept this, right? We did that. Like, that's the part that screws with me. It's really hard to get my head around that people would go that far with this outcome, lie about the outcome, and continue to make it worse by inflaming it with weapons, bullets, and everything else just to kill somebody else. That is mind-blowing to me. And, like, I remember being at the network in this kind of mindset, like, this is outrageous. I can't believe this is happening. And being outraged over, of course, until you get deadened by it, where you're like, okay, I guess this is just what people do. Like, look, I will tell you, working at the station was a wake-up call. It really was.
Yeah, and ultimately, here's where we are, a way that I don't know about you. I don't see a way out for Trump. Just don't see a way out.
Not with Zelensky. And that's the rub. Zelensky is not leaving.
So I guess you just play that hand and wait for the Ukrainians to get softened up. Hopefully that they'll get at some point softened up enough that the Ukrainian leadership will be desperate enough that, because look, Kursk is happening. Man, that ain't going to be the end of it. You're going to see you're going to start to see over the course of the summer, I think, and especially the Russians knowing, okay, we're coming downhill. We're in the final, right? They're going to be circling places, and it's going to start to look real desperate. And I guess maybe the Trump and the people who want it might say we just got to wait until it gets real desperate. If I'm Trump too, I really do. But can he, negotiate with the Russians? I don't know. We can ask these questions forever. Here's what we know: Russians ain't gonna stop fighting. No. And I guess we'll meet Thursday. Who knows? Maybe we'll have some kind of response by the Russians. I mean, on Friday when we talk, maybe we'll have some kind of response from the Russians. But we'll go for it. Jamarl Thomas. What's important, everybody, is Jamarl. This is being run on both of our shows right now. We got 616 people on here. How many you got on yours?
That is a good question. That number is 151. So
151. So we're rolling.
800 people.
Yeah, we're rolling. Not bad. Everybody, if you're a member of my channel, make sure you go over to Jamarl's and subscribe there, and vice versa. Jamarl has a great show every morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And as Jamarl knows, I listen to it because, like, I'm watching it the other day and his guest didn't show up, and I'm like, oh no, guest. I sent him a message. Hey, send me a text. I'm on, right? He's like, oh great, perfect. So he knows I'm watching it every morning. But it's a great show and you'll enjoy it. A lot of the similar guests that we have, a lot of the same stuff, this kind of stuff, it's going on. So you'll enjoy it. Also, you can join my channel if you wish. There's the little join button, $4 or $5 a month, something like that. You got everything going by the bottom, whether it's Rockfin, Telegram, join Patreon if you want to donate to the channel. PayPal, of course, buy me a coffee is always good. All my stuff there. If they want to donate to your channel, how do they do it?
Oh, same. Jamarl Thomas, morning show. What is it? Patreon, PayPal, super chats, memberships, all that stuff. Deeply appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it sounds good. All right, everybody. Most importantly, share this on all your social media platforms. We have a blast. And what do you think? We're going to try to do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 as best we can. What do you think, Jamarl? That work for you?
Yes. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 4 p.m. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good, everybody. So let everybody know this is a show they got to check out. We're out.